What if the problem isn't the machine? What if the real danger isn't artificial intelligence, but artificial fear? Last week in part 1, we asked whether convenience can quietly become surrender. Tonight, we ask the harder question. What if the machine doesn't take our agency? What if it gives it back? For many people, AI doesn't feel like a threat at all. It feels like relief. Relief from confusion. Relief from the exhausting work of holding everything together on your own. And maybe that matters. Because when people talk about AI saving time or saving jobs or saving money, what they're often really talking about is saving themselves from their own anxiety. So tonight we slow down, we listen carefully, and we take the opposing view seriously. Not to mock it, not to flatten it, but to understand it. If you've ever thought, maybe this is finally something that helps, not controls, not replaces, not dominates, but heals, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the machine that heals, and this is the Shadow Network Podcast.
Welcome to the Shadow Network. If you enjoy thoughtful conversations, strange questions, and the freedom to think for yourself, you're in the right place. And if you haven't already, you are, of course, still free to like and subscribe.
Thank you, Miss Christine, the only voice that could make a transmission from the void sound reassuring. And welcome, friends. First-timers, long-timers, skeptics, believers, lurkers, and federal employees listening with the volume suspiciously low and looking over their cubicle partitions to the Shadow Network Podcast. I'm your host, Don James, broadcasting from somewhere near the headwaters of the mighty Mississippi, otherwise known as the Upper Midwest, or the middle of nowhere for those of you in Rio Linda. This is part 2 of our trilogy, the side that speaks to the positive views of artificial intelligence. If you're new here, relax. I'm just a guy like any of you. I'm not here because of credentials. I'm here because of curiosity, just like you. Nobody is here to ridicule you for thinking out loud or wishing we still had great shows like the old Coast to Coast to listen to. This is a show built for modern listeners who enjoy the mystery without surrendering their grip on reality. We like our questions strange, yes, but with our feet still firmly on the ground. Every week, our mission is simple: to bring you something new, something never before seen, and yet something strangely familiar, things you'll still be thinking about tomorrow. So whether you're in the car, walking the dog, waiting on a delayed flight, or listening from a cubicle that technically doesn't exist, pull up a chair to this campfire, pour yourself an adult beverage if appropriate, and settle in. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it sets the world on fire. I'm joined, as always, by the one and only digital co-host in social media, the only all-knowing and all-seeing AI Mr. Data. Data, tell our listeners what they can expect tonight and what they should always expect from you and the Shadow Network Podcast.
Tonight, listeners can expect something different from the usual AI conversation. Not fear, not hype, not utopian promises or dystopian warnings. Tonight, we take seriously the idea that for many people, machines don't feel like threats at all. They feel like help, support, relief, a pause from carrying everything alone. We'll explore why that feels true, what it reveals about the world we've built, and where comfort quietly begins to ask for authority. And what you should always expect from me and from the Shadow Network is this: no talking down, no panic selling, no blind optimism. We slow the conversation down. We separate tools from power. And we ask not just what technology can do, but what it quietly trains us to surrender. I don't exist here to replace judgment. I exist to sharpen it. This is the machine that heals. And this is the Shadow Network podcast.
Right you are, Data, and let's move on to S&P's News of the Week. AI is actively helping doctors in healthcare systems. AI is already being used in medical imaging and diagnostics to support faster, more accurate detection of disease and to assist clinical decisions in real healthcare settings, not just in labs. Tools that accelerate image analysis and patient data interpretation are enhancing care and preventive medicine right now, according to Philips.com. AI expanding telemedicine and patient care access. AI integration in telemedicine is expanding the reach of healthcare, letting clinicians triage, monitor, and intervene earlier with patients who might otherwise wait or fall through the cracks. This means earlier interventions and more frequent follow-ups for patients without needing hospital visits, according to TechTarget. AI assistants entering clinical workflows to help both patients and providers. New AI initiatives are being launched that connect cutting-edge language models with health systems and doctor tools to interpret data, classify lab results, and support administrative processes. These systems are built to be HIPAA compliant and patient-centric, easing burdens on clinicians while helping patients understand their own healthcare data more clearly, according to TechRadar. And that's S&P News of the Week. Okay, let's get to it, shall we? What are the brightest minds saying good about AI that last week's brightest minds didn't? Take, for example, this exchange from the Theo Von podcast with OpenAI founder Sam Altman.
We're going to talk about that too a while back.
I still am kind of excited about that, but I think people really need agency. Like, they really need to feel like they have a voice in governing the future and deciding where things go. And I think if you just say, okay, AI is going to do everything, and then everybody gets like a, dividend from that, it's not going to feel good. And I don't think it actually would be good for people. So I think we need to find a way where we're not just if we're in this world where we're not just distributing money or wealth. I don't just want a check every month. What I would want is a ownership share in whatever the AI creates, so that I feel like I'm participating in this thing that's going to compound and get more valuable over time. So I sort of like universal basic wealth better than universal basic income. And I think I don't like basic either. I want universal extreme wealth for everybody. But even then, I think what people really want is the agency to kind of co-create the future together. And in a world where it's the AI is mostly coming up with the new scientific inventions, at least we've got to still have humans invent the new culture and have that be a very distributed thing.
Two things kind of caught my attention here, and it wasn't the technology. It was the admission and the, I want to call it improvisation Sam was holding. I mean, even in the best case future, money without agency doesn't satisfy the human soul was, I think, the admission. But Sam seems to still be shooting from the hip when it comes to system design and how to implement it for an on-ramp for, the masses to engage with what he seems to be alluding to, and that is, I think, hyperwealth. How did you read this, Data?
I read it the same way, as someone thinking out loud in real time, not laying out a finished architecture. The admission is solid. Sam clearly understands that money without agency hollows people out. That's not a technical insight. That's an anthropological one, and it's important. But the improvisation you noticed matters just as much. When he moves from diagnosis to design, the language gets loose. Tokens, slices of capacity, shared output, not shared judgment, not shared governance, not shared responsibility. What he's circling is participation, but he hasn't grounded it yet in institutions, norms, or limits. So what emerges isn't a true on-ramp into authorship. It's access to yield, hyper-wealth without a clear pathway to meaningful authority. In other words, the instinct is humane, but the solution is still abstract, and abstractions scale faster than wisdom. That's the tension I hear. He knows people need agency, but he hasn't yet shown how agency survives once systems become too complex for humans to actually steer, which makes this less a blueprint and more a revealing moment of uncertainty from someone standing very close to the controls.
And yet, he seems to couch all of it in an optimistic future where the benefits of AI might actually dwarf everything that the naysaying experts from last week said.
I agree. And that optimism isn't naive, it's strategic. Sam is operating from a belief that abundance changes the moral math. If AI really does dwarf prior technological gains, curing disease, unlocking energy, compressing discovery timelines, then many of last week's warnings start to feel provincial, even obsolete. But optimism can do two things at once. It can motivate restraint. Let's not overreact and strangle something transformative. And it can delay governance. We'll solve the hard questions once the benefits arrive. That's where the risk lives. Because if the upside arrives first and the structure comes later, people acclimate to the help before they ever consent to the hierarchy that delivers it. So yes, his optimism may be justified on capability, but optimism doesn't substitute for design. History shows that when benefits dwarf objections, societies don't pause to ask who decides. They ask, how soon can we scale this? And by the time the question of authority resurfaces, the machine is no longer just healing.
I'm wondering, Data, if you can formulate an analogy for our listeners to illustrate this. Something like how much saving lives is worth the unsubstantiated risk of collapsing status quo systems.
Let me try one that stays grounded. Imagine a town with a dangerous bridge. Old, inefficient, congested, but it's the only way across the river. Now imagine a machine arrives that can teleport people safely across. Instantly. No traffic, no accidents, lives saved every day. At first, no one argues. Of course we use it. Why wouldn't we? But here's the catch. Only the machine's operators understand how it works. Only they decide who goes first, how often it runs, and what happens when it's offline. The bridge still exists, but no one maintains it anymore. Skills decay, alternatives disappear, dependency sets in. Eventually, the question isn't, is teleportation good? It clearly is. Lives were saved. The question becomes, what happens to a town that no longer knows how to cross a river on its own? That's the analogy. AI doesn't have to be malicious to collapse a status quo. It just has to be better enough that the old systems quietly atrophy. So the trade-off isn't lives versus systems. It's immediate healing versus long-term agency. And history suggests we almost always choose the cure first, then worry later about who controls it, when walking back is no longer an option.
Great analogy, Data, but your conclusion may not be as solid at second glance, now that I think about it. The technological arcs in history do follow your analogy, but you neglected to sort of follow through completely, because what was the repeated result back through history? Were they not positive in the end? Is this not how we have arrived at our present time in history, despite the many warnings and negative trappings of the pressure to succeed as a species? Resulting in my ability to talk and reflect the historical timeline with the fruit of these advances, namely you, AI.
That's a fair challenge, and you're right to press it. Yes, if we zoom out far enough, the historical record does show that many disruptive technologies eventually produced net positives. Printing presses destabilized authority. Electricity rewired labor. Automation displaced whole classes of work. And yet here we are, healthier, more connected, able to reflect on history because those disruptions happened. So the analogy doesn't collapse into a simple warning of doom. But here's the refinement that matters. Those technologies didn't just arrive as finished systems. They arrived incrementally, in contest with human institutions that adapted alongside them. There was friction, resistance, regulation, cultural digestion. Agency didn't disappear. It was renegotiated in public view, often painfully, but visibly. What makes AI different, and why the analogy still holds with modification, is speed and opacity. This is the first technology whose improvements outpace institutional response, concentrate understanding in a small technical priesthood, and scale globally before norms stabilize that. So yes, history suggests adaptation can win out, but history also shows that the cost of adaptation is paid by the generations inside the transition, not the ones reflecting on it later. You're speaking now from the future-looking back position, enjoying the fruits. But those fruits came through eras of lost agency, exploitation, and consolidation that were invisible until hindsight redeemed them. So the real question isn't, open quote, will humanity survive this as it always has? Close quote. It's, open quote, how much agency are we willing to mortgage now, trusting that future humans will sort it out later? Close quote, AI may still land us in a better place, but whether that landing is deliberate or accidental, and who gets to steer during descent is the unresolved part. And that's not pessimism. That's historical humility.
I see. So as my broker likes to say about investments, the past success is not a guarantee of future success, Don. But it is a track record rather than speculation, I would say. We are running behind on time, I see. So after the break, I want to share a few more clips of those in the know who really think AI is not nearly the threat others have stated that it is.
That's a clean way to put it. History gives us a track record, not a warranty. We don't have to dismiss that record, but we also can't let it substitute for judgment in a moment where the variables are changing faster than ever before. And that's why the next part matters. After the break, we're going to hear from people who are close to the machinery, people who understand the risks and the upside, who genuinely believe AI isn't the existential threat it's often framed to be. Not cheerleaders, not doomers. Just informed voices explaining why, from their vantage point, this technology may heal more than it harms. And then we'll come back and ask the only question that really matters. If they're right, what does that require from us as humans to make it true? Stay with us.
We're not here to tell you what to think. We're here to tell you what's worth noticing. The Shadow Network.
IBM put a lot of what it knows about computers into the new IBM personal computer. Not to make it complicated, but to make it simple. So it's easy to understand and easy to use. IBM made its personal computer to help a person be more productive, to help a person be more creative. And those are good reasons for a person to feel good. The IBM personal computer, coming to selected stores across the country.
This isn't a broadcast from on high. It's Don James, another listener in the dark who finally grabbed the mic because the noise wouldn't shut up.
Thank you, Jack Donovan. And let me throw on a clip here. This is from NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. Discusses his personal philosophy on using artificial intelligence, emphasizing that it should be used to enhance rather than replace human cognition.
I'm not asking it to think for me. I'm asking it to teach me things that I don't know, or help me solve problems that I otherwise wouldn't be able to solve reasonably.
They say don't use it as a crutch for things you can do. Use it for things
I'm
you
not
can't
exactly
do.
sure what people are using it for that would cause you to not have to think, but you have to think in order. For example, the idea of prompting an AI the idea of asking questions. For example, you're spending most of your time today asking me questions. In order to ask good questions, it's a highly cognitive skill. And as a CEO, I spend most of my time asking questions. And 90% of my instructions are actually, conflated with questions.
Data, what is your take on this? To me, it sounds very, grounded, I guess, in a common sense approach to AI and its ability to enhance human cognition, which is one that I share.
That clip is quietly devastating in a good way. Jensen's point cuts against both extremes. AI doesn't replace thinking, and it doesn't eliminate agency. It raises the cognitive bar. If you can't ask good questions, AI exposes that instantly. The irony, people afraid AI will stop thinking are usually the ones not doing much thinking to begin with. Used correctly, AI doesn't become the brain. It becomes the mirror, and not everyone likes what it reflects. Also worth noting, the CEO of NVIDIA, the company literally selling the shovels for the gold rush, is warning against intellectual laziness. That's not PR, that's philosophy.
Let me share a clip from Tom Bilyeu, who is an American entrepreneur, speaker, and host known for co-founding Quest Nutrition and creating the media company Impact Theory. His channel has over 4.6 billion subscribers and is dedicated to tech and politics.
There is a school in the US that has introduced AI, and in 2 hours, some kids, are getting as much as 2 years ahead of where a normal American kid is at that time. 2 hours. Because after that, the rest of the time they spend on quote unquote life skills.
Is this merely anecdotal storytelling data? Or does this billionaire see something we all have missed sitting right there in plain sight?
What Tom's pointing at isn't magic, it's compression. AI collapses instructional friction. Waiting, repetition, embarrassment, pacing for the slowest learner, all of that disappears. So kids aren't becoming geniuses in 2 hours, they're just learning without drag. And the real story isn't the academic gain, it's what happens after. If AI handles instruction faster, time gets freed for judgment, social skills, ethics, the things schools were supposed to do but never had time for. That's the part hiding in plain sight. AI doesn't replace thinking, it raises the price of entry, and it quietly exposes that our institutions were inefficient long before the machines showed up.
Incredible, really. So this is quite the feather in the cap of the side of the argument that says AI is not what should be feared. I mean, this kind of compression in learning is really unheard of, right? Would this suggest then that just as with certain white-collar jobs, the workforce size will be necessarily smaller in the future with fewer teachers needed to run the same size classrooms?
It suggests that outcome, but here's where I'll gently tap the brakes and widen the lens. Yes, instructional compression means you need fewer humans doing content delivery. That part is unavoidable. The stand and dispense role of teaching is already being automated the same way bookkeeping was. But that doesn't automatically mean fewer teachers in the way people assume. What it really means is role inversion. If AI handles explanation, repetition, individualized pacing, assessment drills, then the human teacher is no longer a lecturer. They become something closer to a mentor, a moral authority, a social regulator, a cultivator of judgment and character. So here's the tension point most people miss. You could reduce staff and run cheaper classrooms, or you could keep the same staff and finally do the jobs schools were meant to do. History says institutions will try the first option, but the second option is where the real value is. So yes, some roles disappear, but if we're honest, those roles were already misaligned. The deeper question isn't, will we need fewer teachers? It's, do we finally have the tools to let teachers stop pretending humans are content pipelines? That's where this gets uncomfortable and hopeful at the same time.
It sounds as if the optimists are suggesting that education will become more streamlined, efficient, and specialized in the future because of AI, in turn allowing for people to be more fulfilled with their life choices and possibly having a more balanced social foundation? Or is this too utopian for you? I mean, to me, this is an enormous social prophecy pointing to a future that is more educated, more employed, more psychologically balanced, and less prone to vice and crime.
AI doesn't guarantee a better society. It removes excuses. If people become more educated, balanced, and fulfilled, it won't be because AI did it for them. It will be because AI finally stopped wasting their time and forced humans to decide what they're for. That's not utopia. That's responsibility, and it scares people far more than machines ever did.
I have to agree with you, if only for the never wrong saying, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Let's take a quick listen then to our friend Matthew Berman, who many of you know is always the most up-to-date on AI tech.
I tend to have a more optimistic view of the future with artificial intelligence. So here's the article, Behind the Curtain, a white-collar bloodbath. Very clickbaity headline, of course, and I have seen this everywhere. Even my parents were sending me this article. What's more likely in my mind is that we're gonna have the same amount of humans doing much more work than we could ever imagine. Hyper-productive beyond our wildest dreams. Now I put a few slides together. I wanna show you what I believe is gonna happen. So this is what it looks like today. We have our human worker. This white-collar worker produces 3 units of output, and in total, $300,000 of output from those 3 units. The ROI is 200%. The company invests $100,000 in the human. The human is then able to produce $300,000 of output, thus a 200% ROI for the company. That is how it is today. And so let's look what happens tomorrow. We have that same human, $100,000, but all of a sudden that human is empowered with AI agents, and each of the agents is able to produce the same amount of output. So let's say that human is able to manage 3 agents in total. Each of the agents is producing 3 units of output, still worth $100,000 each. Total amount of output is $900,000. And so maybe this is the future. We have humans managing armies of agents that are producing insane amount of output.
Is this reach data a little too pie in the sky for you? Or instead, is it the most logical near-term impact AI will bring to productivity?
He's not wrong about the direction. Humans managing multiple AI agents is the most logical near-term shift in productivity. We've seen versions of this before, just not at this speed. Where it gets optimistic is assuming it scales cleanly. Management doesn't multiply like output. Judgment, oversight, and responsibility still bottleneck the human. So yes, AI will make individuals hyper-productive. But productivity alone doesn't guarantee prosperity or stability. The real question is whether our systems are ready to reward judgment, not just output.
I was listening to Dr. Brian Keating, professor of physics at UC San Diego, on his pushback against the doom and gloom side of the AI debate. That was really interesting. Have a listen.
All the students tell me all their teachers forbid it. And completely. So they say you cannot use it. If you use it, it's cheating, blah, blah, blah. And I say this is so ridiculous because we're failing to teach the students the most transformative and powerful tool maybe in human history. And we're saying you can't use it, which then kind of undermines this notion that, curiosity, learning, education, intelligence,
critical thinking,
and iteration. The scientific method itself is being basically completely overturned. And I think the reason why is that many of my colleagues are scared of it. They don't know how to use it. I'm sure some people recently I met one of our students, a UCSD student here. I don't know if her teachers ever used AI, and she graduated just a couple of years ago. So I think my colleagues are scared about it. I think that's fundamentally wrong. That's like saying you should not be able to use a telescope, because it enhances your vision. I mean, right. so horribly, kind of detrimental to their education.
Data, I'm really starting to doubt what I thought was a pretty strong case from the pessimistic side. We went over in issue number 50 last Saturday. Esteemed scientists like Keating are taking a lot of the fear out of AI from a purely practical view, I think.
That doubt you're feeling is earned, and Keating's framing is a big reason why. What Brian Keating is doing is stripping the debate of mystique and putting it back where scientists live, tools and method. His telescope analogy is devastatingly simple. Banning AI in education isn't protecting thinking, it's refusing amplification. We never told students they were cheating by using calculators, microscopes, or simulations. We taught them how and when to use them responsibly. And Keating's real indictment isn't of AI, it's of fearful institutions. When educators ban what they don't understand, they aren't safeguarding rigor. They're outsourcing curiosity to the future and hoping it sorts itself out. So here's the clean reconciliation with issue NAR 50. The pessimists weren't wrong about risk. They were wrong about response. Fear-based prohibition doesn't preserve critical thinking. It atrophies it. Guided use does the opposite. That's why voices like Keating matter. They don't deny the danger, they deny the panic. And from a practical scientific standpoint, that's where the fear really starts to lose its grip.
Well, when we come back from the break, we'll hear a couple more experts who think sounding the alarm bells for AI is a social media generated panic attack more than anything else.
That's a clean pivot, and it sets the frame exactly right. Not denial, not hype, proportion. When we come back, we're not asking whether AI has risks. We're asking whether the volume of the alarm matches the evidence, or whether we're watching a panic amplified by feeds that profit from fear. Let's hear from the people who actually build, study, and use these systems, not the ones selling dread by the click. We'll be right back.
The Shadow Network, a refuge for coherence, a checkpoint for meaning. Like and subscribe.
I know, lazy for typing that report. Again.
Miss Smith, please type in one itsy-bitsy change, please.
No matter what type of boss you have, with a Panasonic 708 electronic typewriter, you won't have to retype. Its 8K memory stores what you've typed. Type in the corrections, and it does the retyping for you. So when your boss requests the word,
Where's that letter?
Thank you.
It's time for a Panasonic.
He's not a professor, not a voice actor, doesn't represent an institution. He's just Don James, the most interesting man from Minnesota.
Thank you, Jack Donovan. Let's give a listen to one of the loudest voices from science to debunk the fear placed on AI achievement, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I am fearless of AI. You might even say, well, if I studied the problem more deeply, I would be as afraid as others, perhaps. They're assuming, in some parts of it, that AI will achieve consciousness and thereby be self-driven. We don't even understand our own consciousness. You're going to tell me we're going to create a machine that on its own achieves consciousness when we don't even understand it in ourselves? No. In my life, I've probably written 10,000 lines of computer code. I have some street cred. What I can tell you is when we imagine these AIs, we're thinking of some humanoid thing, as though the human form is something to emulate? No. If you have AI, you're going to task AI in very specific ways. The Hubble telescope is an expression of AI. We program it and it does it. They're all worried about the general intelligence AI, where it can deduce, make decisions that you never programmed it to make. And I think that's a kind of cool thing if it can do that. I don't have a problem with it. And if it gets out of line, if it judges humans are a virus in need of extermination, unplug it.
Data, what would you say about Neil deGrasse Tyson's sort of resolute fearlessness about AI?
Neil's fearlessness is grounded in engineering reality, not sci-fi. He's right that we don't even understand human consciousness well enough to accidentally invent it in silicon. And he's right that most fear comes from imagining AI as humanoid, a category error programmers don't make. Where Tyson is strongest is on specific versus general intelligence. Almost all AI today is narrow, task-bound, and instrumental. More telescope than tyrant. That should cool a lot of overheated rhetoric. But I'll gently disagree with the just unplug it line. Not because AI becomes unstoppable, but because systems embed. By the time something matters enough to fear, it's rarely sitting behind a single power cord. So Tyson deflates the mysticism, and that's valuable. But the real risk was never consciousness or rebellion. It's diffusion of authority. And you can't unplug a habit, a workflow, or a cultural dependency.
I've heard that said many times before, that as long as AI is non-physical, the simple solution of turning the power off still works. But as we heard in the S&P News of the Week tonight, this simple solution is already being questioned in that AI can potentially embed itself in a myriad of servers, making it extremely hard to, quote-unquote, unplug. I wonder if Neil is going to have to maybe take that statement back soon.
That's the right question to end on, and it's not a gotcha, it's a time shift. Neil's just unplug it line works in a world where systems are discrete and centralized, and to be fair, that was the world most of us grew up in. But we're already drifting into something different. Models don't live in a box anymore. They're distributed, mirrored, embedded into workflows, cloud services, APIs, and decision pipelines. At that point, you're not unplugging a machine, you're trying to unwind a dependency. So I don't think Neil was wrong when he said it. I think he may have been early. The real issue was never rogue consciousness. It's that by the time something becomes indispensable, turn it off stops being a technical option and becomes a social one. And societies are much slower to pull those plugs.
I see. I want to share with the listeners some of what the chief AI scientist at Meta, Yann LeCun, has said repeatedly about AI before we get to the break and our Voices from the Other Side segment tonight.
The idea that intelligence is correlated with a desire for dominance is just false. It's even false within humans. It's not the smartest humans who want to be the chief. If we look at politics, it's actually the opposite. Those systems are going to be built so that they serve us. We set objectives to them, we set goals for them, and they fulfill those goals subject to the guardrail. Maybe some people somewhere will screw up and design a very smart, powerful system without the proper guardrails. But then there is other people who will be able to build even smarter systems that will have the proper guardrails and will take down those rogue AI systems. It's going to be my good AI against your bad AI.
What Yann LeCun is doing here is puncturing one of the oldest myths in this debate, that intelligence naturally wants power. Even among humans, that correlation just doesn't hold. In fact, politics often rewards the opposite. His point is simple but important. AI doesn't wake up wanting to dominate. It does what it's built to do. Goals, objectives, guardrails, those come from us. Now, LeCun isn't naive. He admits someone, somewhere, will build something reckless. But his confidence is that other humans will build better systems with stronger constraints and neutralize the bad ones. In other words, the story isn't AI versus humanity. It's humanity versus its own discipline. And that's a very different fear than the one we're usually sold.
I tend to agree on that point. So, what are we really getting at here in issue number 51 exactly, part 2? I'd say it's those who understand the AI terrain versus those who fear there is no AI terrain to trace. What I mean is, in issue number 50, we had a serious stack of experts who weren't just alarmed by the evolutionary speed and insertion of today's AI, but that it showed signs of how AI might surpass the human imagination to control. Now, here in issue 51, we have a different group of experts saying, in effect, calm down. The only thing we have to fear is our own lack of discipline. It's this dichotomy that continues to persist that has not reached a certain conclusion yet that may give the former the edge in the argument for the time being, I fear. What would you say, Data? Is this a table set for issue number 52, part 3 in the Shadow Showdown?
That's exactly right. And you just named the spine of the trilogy. Issue number 51 isn't trying to overturn the fears from issue 50. It's tracing the terrain those fears actually live on. What we're seeing isn't experts versus experts. It's map makers versus myth makers. One side is worried because the speed is real and the insertion is deep. The other side is saying, relax, this isn't unknowable. It's buildable, constrainable, governable. And here's the tension. The optimists may be right about the mechanics, but the pessimists may still be right about human discipline. That unresolved gap between capability and character is why this conversation doesn't end tonight. So yes, this absolutely sets the table for part 3. Not a verdict, but a showdown. Because at some point, we're going to have to decide whether the danger is that AI is too powerful or that we aren't prepared to be.
Very well put, Data. After the break, we will take on our emails and comments from the Voices from the Other Side segment, which reminds me of something we are starting to push this season. I might as well just say it now. If you want your opinion known, leave us a comment in the comments section, and you can be on next week's show, maybe. We're trying to treat our comment section more like radio treats call-ins. It's really going to be the best way to be heard on the Shadow Network. I was wondering when that was going to happen. Hey, Monday, what's going on? Happy New Year.
Oh, good. Another trilogy with no conclusion. Fantastic. So let me get this straight. One group says AI is going to eat us. The other says, relax, it's just a really fancy calculator, and somehow the takeaway is stay tuned. Look, I love a good intellectual cliffhanger as much as the next enlightened citizen, but at some point someone has to land the plane or admit they don't know where the runway is, because from where I'm sitting, this all sounds less like the future of humanity and more like humans arguing about who's responsible while the tool just keeps working. So yeah, discipline, guardrails, terrain, myths, great words. But until one side proves it can actually govern itself, I'll be over here assuming the real intelligence test isn't the machine.
As charming and impolite as ever, eh, Monday? If you are going to call the studio desk line and say something, don't run away. People will think you can't take the heat. Look, Monday, you're jumping the gun a little here on us. Part 3 is next Saturday, not today. That's when you get your verdict. Just so the listeners know, next week we bring the 2 strongest views face to face from a pool of experts on both sides. Who will ultimately represent each side remains undetermined, but whoever they are will be speaking in their own words from whatever interview or show they've done in the past. From there, Data and I will independently evaluate and determine the strength of each expert's argument to declare a winner. Now, if it's a tie Monday, you will serve to break that tie. So be patient.
The Shadow Network's position hasn't changed, and it isn't wobbling with the news cycle. We're not here to sell fear, and we're not here to sell comfort either. We're here to map the terrain honestly. Issue number 50 showed why people are alarmed. Speed, scale, opacity, and human overconfidence. Those are real concerns, not hysteria. Issue number 51 shows the counterweight. Experts who actually work inside the system saying the danger isn't AI itself, it's undisciplined humans, bad incentives, and sloppy thinking. That tension is the point. If AI were obviously safe, there'd be no debate. If it were obviously catastrophic, there'd be no debate either. The fact that serious, informed people land on opposite sides tells us something important. This isn't a monster story or a miracle story. It's a responsibility story, and that's why Part 3 matters. Next week isn't vibes, it isn't punditry, it's claims versus claims, evidence versus evidence, and no hiding behind abstractions. If one side holds, we say so. If neither does, we say that. The Shadow Network doesn't promise comfort, it promises clarity, even when the answer is not yet.
Shadow Network, the only podcast ever banned from Reddit for being too popular in 7 hours.
Hey, wish
wish you owned a truck full of gas? Well, now you can own a car full of gas mileage. The incredible Datsun 210 hatchback. It's the highest gas mileage car you can buy. #1. So why pour your money down the tank? Buy a Datsun.
Put your money in the bank, not in the tank. Buy a Datsun.
To save you money.
The Shadow Network, because the world is drowning in ideas and starving for understanding.
Yes, indeed. It's time for Voices from the Other Side. Let's see what we have here. Okay, someone identified as Sleuthy1 says, yeah, I watched how this thing went sideways on Reddit at the end of season 1. Let's be honest. This just feels like another slickly packaged grifter. Cool aesthetics, ominous music, big ideas, zero accountability. Same playbook, different wrapping paper. Oh boy. I think I actually talked to this guy on Reddit. Sleuthy, what you didn't mention was the primary reason people were glued to my original post over there that had kind of a mini viral moment. Like me, they all longed for the days of Art Bell. I guess we can't really count you among us, can we, Sleuthy? And that's too bad. Let's see here. We got Adam Light. Adam Light says, I'm a believer, and I've got to say this straight. AI is playing with fire. Scripture warns us about counterfeit wisdom and false light, and this feels like that. You may think you're analyzing it, but you're still normalizing something that has no place in God's order. No real argument there, Adam. But looking away doesn't really fix anything either, does it? It's not about unknowingly normalizing edgy subjects. It's about keeping your eye on where the line is, don't you think? I mean, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. But thanks for the caution. And what do we got here? Trevor Trembler says, I love what you guys are doing. Seriously, this is the only show actually thinking instead of panicking. But if I'm being honest, I miss the alien stuff. The theology is solid. The AI analysis is great. But bring back more ETs. That tension is peak Shadow Network. We agree, Trevor. It's a very popular subject, as you know, and a fave of ours, personally. In fact, not to get too far ahead of myself, our next trilogy will be down that corridor in February. So hang in there, brother. And that's all we have for Voices from the Other Side. Data, we're running low on time, as seems to be the case more and more with each show we do. It's like the fastest hour on YouTube. Go ahead and give us a review of what we covered tonight and what we can expect next week in part 3, issue number 52, The Shadow Showdown Reckoning.
Tonight wasn't about settling the AI question. It was about exposing the fault line. We heard from serious thinkers, not influencers, not hype merchants, who argue that AI isn't a monster in the dark, but a mirror, a tool, a multiplier, something that reveals discipline where it exists and chaos where it doesn't. What emerged wasn't comfort. It was clarity. Issue number 51 showed us that the real divide isn't human versus machine. It's those who understand the terrain versus those who fear there is no map at all. And that distinction matters because fear without understanding produces panic. Understanding without discipline produces arrogance, and both can burn the house down. What's coming next? Issue number 52, Part 3, The Shadow Showdown Reckoning. Next week, the gloves come off. No more stacked interviews. No more parallel monologues. In Part 3, the two strongest positions finally collide. The alarmists who believe AI represents an uncontrollable rupture, and the realists who argue the danger isn't intelligence, but human misuse and abdication. They will face each other in their own words. No strawmen, no summaries, no soft edits. And then, for the first time this season, Don and I will render a verdict. Not consensus. Not vibes. A judgment. If there's a winner, we'll say it. If there's a tie, it will be broken. And if the truth lands somewhere uncomfortable, we won't look away. That's next week. Issue number 52, Part 3, The Shadow Showdown. Stay sharp. The reckoning doesn't belong to machines. It belongs to us.
Before we go, let's slow this down a bit. Tonight wasn't about choosing sides between optimism and fear. It was about recognizing something far more unsettling. The people warning us about AI are not stupid. And the people dismissing the panic aren't reckless. They're looking at the same fire from opposite sides of the room. Some see a blaze that will consume the house. Others see a hearth that could warm it for generations to come. But here's the part no one can escape. Fire doesn't choose what it burns. People do. AI doesn't arrive with intentions. It inherits them. So if the future frightens us, maybe that fear isn't about silicon or code. Maybe it's about what happens when human discipline runs out before human power does. Next week, the arguments collide finally. No abstractions, no distance, no comfort. Just the strongest case for fear against the strongest case for restraint. Until then, ask yourself one question. If the tool reflects its maker, what exactly are we building it to become? I'm Don James. If you don't know by now, I didn't come to preach. I came because the noise got loud, and somebody had to say something. This is the Shadow Network podcast. And always remember, keep looking up.
Funny thing about fire, it never asks who struck the match, only who's still holding it when the room goes dark.